I trusted my wife with everything, my love, my future, even my father's inheritance. When my dad passed away, he left me $350,000. I placed it in our joint account without a second thought. Samantha and I had talked for years about buying a bigger house, starting a family, and settling down for real. So when the money started disappearing bit by bit, I didn't panic. I believed her. She said it was for surprise renovations, helping her sister through a tough time, even booking trips to scout locations for future projects. I wanted to believe her. I needed to. But then I saw a credit card statement, a luxury hotel suite in Denver, another in San Diego. She wasn't scouting anything. She was sleeping with another man, and she was using my father's legacy to fund her affair. But that wasn't even the worst part. What my lawyer uncovered in her text messages changed everything. If you've ever trusted someone completely only to find out they were laughing behind your back, you'll want to hear this story. Stick around and subscribe to Revenge with Chris for more true stories of betrayal and the justice that followed. My name is Jonathan Miller. I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the last 12 years building a veterinary clinic from the ground up here in Minneapolis. Helping animals has always been my purpose. It's the thing that kept me grounded, even when life got overwhelming. 6 years ago, I married Samantha. She was charming, intelligent, and full of ideas about our future. From the very beginning, I thought we were a team. We made promises over late-night takeout. We talked about the kids we'd have someday, the trips we'd take, the kind of house we wanted to grow old in. When my father passed away, I was devastated. He wasn't just a dad. He was my mentor, my biggest supporter. He helped me get through vet school when I didn't think I could make it. And he always reminded me, don't build a life alone, find someone who builds with you. So when he left me $350,000, I didn't see it as just money. I saw it as the key to everything we'd been dreaming about. I told Samantha right away. We sat on the couch that night, wine glasses in hand, and mapped out what we'd do with it. A down payment on a bigger house, maybe even a little cabin up north where we could take our future kids during the summers. She seemed excited, supportive. She even cried a little, saying how proud my father would be. So I took all of it, every cent, and put it in our joint account. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to, because I trusted her. At the time, things felt solid between us, or at least I thought they did. Running a veterinary clinic is no small task. I was working 60-hour weeks, managing emergency surgeries, late-night house call, staff schedules. It consumed me, but I kept thinking, push through now so we can enjoy later. And Samantha, she seemed to be doing the same. She worked in marketing, and her job took her out of town once or twice a month. She'd come back with brochures, real estate listings, and stories about interesting neighborhoods she'd scouted for our future dream home. It all seemed believable because it fit our vision, and because I was too tired to question it. Then came the withdrawals. At first, I didn't notice. Maybe it was 5,000 here, 10 there. We weren't spending lavishly, so I assumed she was moving things around for a surprise. One weekend, she said she was going to visit her sister, who was apparently dealing with a messy divorce and needed to help her with some bills. When I finally asked about the money, she didn't flinch. She said she was planning something special for our anniversary. Just trust me. She smiled, so I did. Looking back, there were moments that didn't feel right. She started dressing differently, spending longer hours getting ready. She began checking her phone more frequently, turning the screen away when I walked into the room. And our conversations about starting a family, they became vague. Every time I brought up seeing a fertility doctor, she had an excuse. Still, I told myself it was the stress, her work, my grief. The clinic, life. One night, I stayed late at the office to help deliver a litter of golden retriever puppies. I remember holding the last one in my hands, thinking how ready I was to be a dad. I even texted her a picture and said, one day it'll be our turn. She replied an hour later with just, we'll see that moment. It didn't break me, but it left a crack, and soon everything we'd built began to collapse through it. Weeks passed, and that uneasy feeling never left me. I tried to bury myself in work, telling myself I was overthinking things, that Samantha was just under pressure like I was. But late at night, when the house was quiet and I was alone with my thoughts, the doubts crept in. One Saturday morning, while sorting through the mail, I noticed an envelope from our credit card company. Normally, Samantha handled most of the bills. Something I never questioned before. But this time curiosity got the better of me. I opened it. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. There were charges from hotels I'd never heard of. The Grand Aurora Seaside Lux Resort, the Monarch Suites, all luxury hotels, all in cities. Samantha claimed she was visiting for work conferences, Denver, San Diego, Chicago. Thousands of dollars spent on weekend stays, spa treatments, fine dining, and designer boutiques. My hands started to shake. I flipped through the pages hoping for some logical explanation, but deep down I already knew. When she came home that evening, suitcase in hand and that same practiced smile on her face, I couldn't hold it in. I laid the statements on the kitchen table. "What's this, Samantha?" For a moment she stood frozen. Then, like a switch had flipped, she launched into a story. Something about client meetings being held at those hotels, expenses being reimbursed later, and how I shouldn't worry because she had it all under control. But her voice wavered. Her eyes darted. "I wasn't buying it anymore." "Samantha," I said quietly, "don't lie to me. Not about this." That's when the facade cracked. She sat down, buried her face in her hands, and confessed. She told me she'd been seeing someone, her colleague from work, a man I'd met once at a company holiday party, married with 2 kids. They'd started the affair nearly a year ago. What began as just flirting had turned into secret getaways, expensive gifts, and weekend escapes, all funded by my father's inheritance. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Every word she spoke felt like a knife twisting deeper. I asked her why. Why betray me like this? Why take the money that was supposed to build our future? She looked me dead in the eyes and said, "Because it was easy. You trusted me too much." That sentence, it broke something inside me. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just stood up, walked out of the house, and drove aimlessly for hours, my mind racing between anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could I have been so blind? How did the woman I planned to spend my life with turn into a stranger who could steal not just money, but my trust, my dreams, and my father's legacy? When I finally returned home, Samantha was already asleep in the guest room, or pretending to be. I sat alone in the dark living room, staring at those credit card statements. And that's when something shifted inside me. I wasn't going to be the victim in this story. She didn't just betray me, she planned it. And if she thought she could walk away after draining my inheritance, she was about to learn who she'd underestimated. The next morning, without saying a word to Samantha, I called a divorce attorney. Not just any attorney, I called Richard Hale, a name that came highly recommended for handling complicated betrayals. When I told him everything, he listened carefully, then asked one question that lit the spark for what was to come. "Do you think she left a trail?" I hadn't thought about that. But knowing Samantha and how brazen she'd become, I was willing to bet she had. Richard assured me we'd find it. And when we did, she wouldn't just be facing a divorce, she'd be facing consequences she never saw coming. Richard moved fast. Within days, he filed for divorce on my behalf and secured a court order to access Samantha's financial records and phone data. I didn't know exactly what we'd find, but part of me feared it would be worse than I imagined. Turns out I wasn't prepared at all. When Richard called me into his office, he didn't sugarcoat anything. He slid a folder across the desk filled with printed text messages between Samantha and her lover, Paige. After page of conversations that made my stomach turn. It wasn't just an affair. It was an operation. They talked openly about draining my inheritance, laughing about how clueless I was. One message from Samantha read, "He trusts me with every dollar. We'll have that account empty in no time." Her lover replied, "Once he's dry, we'll disappear. New city, new life, just you and me." I could barely breathe as I flipped through the evidence. They had planned everything. Each hotel stay, each expensive gift. They treated my father's legacy like their personal piggy bank. But then I found something even darker. There were messages about me, not just about the money, but about my desire to start a family. I'd always wanted kids. Samantha knew that from the day we met. For months she told me she was trying, that it just hadn't happened yet. We even discussed booking appointments with a fertility specialist. But buried in those texts was the truth. "Don't worry, I'm still on the pill." Samantha had written, "He keeps talking about babies, but I'm not ruining my body for him." Her lover responded with a laughing emoji and said, Smart girl, keep stringing him along until we cash out. I stared at those words, feeling like the floor beneath me had collapsed. It wasn't just betrayal, it was calculated cruelty. Every conversation we'd had about building a future together, about children, about hope, had been a lie. She'd looked me in the eyes month after month and pretended I felt humiliated. Used, stripped of every ounce of dignity. Richard placed a hand on my shoulder. I know this is hard to read, he said quietly, but this is exactly what we needed. With this, the judge won't just see infidelity, he'll see fraud, deceit, and financial abuse. I nodded, but inside I was numb. That night, I went home to a house that no longer felt like mine. Samantha was in the kitchen scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. I didn't say a word to her. There was nothing left to say. The point of no return had come and gone. Whatever love I once had for her had been buried beneath the weight of those messages. I wasn't Jonathan the husband anymore. I was Jonathan the man who would make sure she paid for every calculated decision she made. In the days that followed, I moved into a small apartment near my clinic while Richard prepared for court. Samantha tried to reach out, texts, voicemails, even a half-hearted apology email, but I didn't respond. Why would I? She wasn't sorry for what she did. She was sorry she got caught. And soon the world, especially the judge, would see exactly who she really was. Richard had a plan, and it was brilliant. This isn't just a divorce case, he told me. We're framing this as financial exploitation and intentional deceit. Judges don't take kindly to spouses who abuse trust like this. We compiled everything: bank statements, credit card charges, hotel bookings, and most importantly, the damning text messages. Richard organized it into a clear timeline showing exactly how Samantha and her lover siphoned off my inheritance. But he didn't stop there. Richard suggested we subpoena Samantha's company records. If her affair partner had been using company time and resources for their little escapades, it could cost him his job and strengthen our case by proving this wasn't just a personal betrayal, but a reckless abuse of professional conduct. Within a week, we had confirmation emails between Samantha and her lover sent during work hours, planning trips, sharing photos from luxury suites, and even discussing how to manipulate me further. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't a lapse in judgment, it was a long-term scheme. The court date arrived faster than I expected. I walked into that courtroom feeling a mix of nerves and quiet resolve. Samantha sat across from me, dressed in a conservative suit, pretending to be the picture of innocence. But I saw through it, and soon so would everyone else. Richard presented our case with precision. He laid out the financial trail, the timeline, and then dropped the bombshell, the printed text messages. The judge's expression hardened as he read through the transcripts, page after page of Samantha, mocking my trust, laughing about draining the account, and conspiring to deceive me about starting a family. Samantha's attorney tried to argue that the money was shared marital assets and that there was no clear agreement on how it should be used. But Richard shut that down immediately. He pointed out that this was inheritance legally recognized as separate property unless explicitly gifted, which I never did. Then came Richard's closing statement. Your Honor, this isn't just a case of infidelity. This is a calculated exploitation of trust. Mr. Miller placed his late father's legacy into a joint account out of love and good faith. Mrs. Miller saw it as an opportunity to fund an affair, to manipulate, and to deceive. The evidence speaks louder than any excuse. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at Samantha, who by now had tears streaming down her face. Whether from regret or fear, I couldn't tell. Finally, the ruling came. Samantha was ordered to repay the full amount she had withdrawn from the inheritance plus legal fees. The judge called her actions a blatant abuse of marital trust and financial misconduct. But that wasn't all. News of the subpoenaed work emails reached her lover's company. Within days, he was fired for misconduct, and as fate would have it, his wife, now armed with the same evidence, filed for divorce and demanded a full financial audit. I heard through mutual acquaintances that when Samantha realized her affair partner was cutting ties to protect his own skin, she tried to reach out to me again, probably hoping for some form of sympathy. She didn't get it. For the first time in months, I felt in control, not out of revenge, but because I stood up for myself and for what my father had entrusted me with. When I walked out of that courtroom, it wasn't just a legal victory, It was the closing of a chapter I never thought I'd have to write, and I promised myself this wouldn't define me. It would refine me. A week after the court ruling, I received one final message from Samantha. "Can we talk? Please, I need to explain." I stared at my phone for a long moment. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part of me wanted closure. Not for her sake, but for mine, I agreed to meet her at a small cafe near where we used to live. Neutral ground. When I walked in, she was already there, looking nothing like the confident woman who once planned a future at my expense. She looked defeated, eyes puffy hair, unkempt fingers, nervously twisting a napkin. "Jonathan," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. I, I don't even know where to begin." I sat down calmly, keeping my hands folded on the table. "There's nothing left to explain, Samantha. You made your choices." She tried to launch into an apology, blaming stress, bad decisions, even claiming her lover manipulated her. But I wasn't there for excuses. "What do you want from me?" I asked, cutting her off. She hesitated before admitting the truth. Her lover had abandoned her. He was too busy dealing with his own divorce and financial fallout to care about her anymore. On top of that, Samantha was drowning in debt, unable to repay what the court ordered. "I lost everything," she whispered, tears welling up. I didn't think it would end like this." I looked at her for a long moment, feeling nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just emptiness. "Samantha," I said quietly, "you didn't lose everything. You threw it away." I stood up, dropped a few bills on the table for my coffee, and walked out, leaving her sitting there in the mess she created. That was the last time I ever saw her. In the months that followed, I focused entirely on rebuilding my life. The repayment from Samantha came slowly, court-ordered wage garnishments, but it wasn't about the money anymore. It was about principle. I poured my energy into my veterinary clinic, expanding services, hiring new staff, and reconnecting with the passion that had always grounded me. But something still felt missing. One evening, while going through some old boxes, I found a letter from my father, the one he'd written to me when he finalized his will. In it, he reminded me that wealth wasn't measured by money, but by the impact we leave behind. That's when the idea struck me. Instead of letting this inheritance saga define me by loss and betrayal, I'd turn it into something meaningful. I used part of the recovered funds and my growing business revenue to establish the Miller Foundation, offering free veterinary care to elderly pet owners struggling financially. It was exactly the kind of legacy my father would have been proud of. Meanwhile, word spread about Samantha's downfall. She lost her job due to the scandal, her reputation shattered. Last I heard, she was living in a small apartment, working a low-paying job, and trying to stay afloat under the weight of debt and regret. As for her lover, his wife took him for everything in their divorce. He moved out of state, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and burned bridges. But me, I didn't just survive, I grew stronger. People often ask if I'd ever consider dating again, if I could trust someone after what happened. The answer is yes. But now I walk into relationships with open eyes and clear boundaries. Love is still worth believing in, but trust that has to be earned, not given blindly. In the end, Samantha thought she was playing a game one where she could win by taking everything from me. What she never realized is that real strength isn't about what you hold on to, it's about what you can rebuild after someone tries to tear you down. It's been nearly 2 years since that chapter of my life ended. Some nights I still think about the moment I opened that credit card statement. The disbelief, the crushing realization that everything I thought was safe, my marriage, my future, my father's legacy was already gone. But those moments don't haunt me anymore. They remind me of how far I've come. I've grown into a version of myself I never knew I had the strength to become. My veterinary practice is thriving now with 2 locations and a full staff I trust like family. The Miller Foundation has helped hundreds of elderly pet owners keep their companions healthy and happy. Every thank you card I receive reminds me that good can grow from even the darkest places. I didn't just recover, I transformed. There's a certain peace in knowing that you didn't stoop to the level of those who wronged you, that you chose dignity over bitterness. I could have made Samantha's life harder. I didn't. The truth in her own decisions did that for me. People often assume revenge is loud, explosive, dramatic. But real revenge, it's walking away from the wreckage someone tried to trap you in and building something beautiful out of it. If you're listening to this and you've been betrayed by a partner, a friend, a family member, I want you to hear this. You are not the damage they caused. You are the resilience that followed. Don't let their betrayal shape your future. Let your response define your strength. And always, always protect your peace like it's the most valuable inheritance you'll ever receive. Because sometimes it is. So what would you do if someone used your trust and your family's legacy to fund a lie? Would you walk away quietly or make sure the truth came out? Let us know in the comments. Vote. Forgive and forget versus expose and rebuild. Drop your thoughts below. Like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Thanks for listening to Revenge with Chris. Until next time, trust wisely and carry your scars with pride.